A bullied teen stood up for a kid, not knowing he'd become a superhero to millions. It was a simple act. One trembling hand extended toward another, fingers closing around a smaller palm while rain drummed against the metal awning of the bus stop. But that's how these stories often begin, don't they? Not with capes or cosmic radiation, but with ordinary courage on ordinary days. Ethan Parker, 16 and slim-shouldered, carried the weight of years of taunts and shoves in the way he walked. Head slightly bowed, shoulders curved inward, as if perpetually bracing for impact. The hallways of Westridge High were a gauntlet he navigated with practiced precision, timing his movements to avoid the usual corners, where Blake Donovan and his friends liked to wait. Today had been worse than most. His backpack was soaked through after being thrown into a toilet. His sketchbook, his refuge of half-formed heroes and impossible worlds, was damaged, the pages wrinkled and bleeding colors, and the bruise forming beneath his ribs from being slammed against the locker throbbed with each careful breath. The rain matched his mood as he waited at the bus stop, a steady curtain of gray that blurred the edges of the world. He wanted nothing more than to disappear into that blur, to become as formless and invisible as the mist rising from the wet pavement. That's when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of mockery, high-pitched laughter edged with cruelty. 3 boys, maybe 12 or 13, had cornered a smaller kid against the brick wall of the convenience store behind the bus stop. The child couldn't have been older than 9, with oversized glasses slipping down his nose and a Spider-Man backpack clutched protectively against his chest. "Give it up, freak," one of the older boys demanded, reaching for the backpack. "Let's see what you've got in there." "Please," the child whispered, his voice nearly lost beneath the drumming rain. "My inhaler's in there." "I need it." Something shifted in Ethan then, a subtle realignment like tectonic plates beneath the surface. He recognized the look in the child's eyes. It was the same one he saw in his own reflection each morning. Resignation edged with desperate hope that today might somehow be different. Before he could think better of it, Ethan was moving. His sneakers splashed through puddles as he crossed the short distance. "Hey!" he called, his voice steadier than he felt. "Leave him alone." The 3 boys turned, surprise flickering across their faces before settling into sneers. "Mind your own business," the tallest one said, puffing out his chest. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed for him to back away, to return to his careful invisibility. But the small boy with the Spider-Man backpack was watching him with wide, desperate eyes, and somehow that mattered more than his fear. "He is my business," Ethan said, stepping closer. His hands were trembling, but he shoved them into his pockets. "My brother." The lie came easily, wrapped in conviction. "And if you touch him again, you'll have to deal with me." It was a ridiculous threat. Ethan had never won a fight in his life. But something in his voice, the calm certainty perhaps, or the unfamiliar steel beneath his words, made the boys hesitate. "Ethan?" "Whatever," the leader finally muttered, backing away. "Wasn't worth it anyway." They skulked off, casting dark glances over their shoulders. The rain continued to fall, but Ethan barely noticed it now. The small boy stared up at him, clutching his backpack like a shield. "You okay?" Ethan asked, crouching down to the child's level. The boy nodded, glasses sliding further down his nose. "Thank you," he whispered. Then after a moment's hesitation, "I'm not really your brother." A smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth. "I know. I'm Ethan. Miles?" the boy said, pushing his glasses back into place. "Miles Reyes." Ethan glanced toward the bus stop. His bus would be arriving soon, but he couldn't just leave Miles here alone. "Where's your bus? Or is someone picking you up?" Miles looked down, scuffing his shoe against the wet pavement. "My mom works late on Tuesdays. I'm supposed to wait at the library, but..." He trailed off, but Ethan understood. The library meant walking past the convenience store, past the same boys who might still be lurking nearby. "Come on," Ethan said, standing and offering his hand. "I'll walk you there." Miles hesitated only a moment before slipping his small hand into Ethan's. Together they walked the 3 blocks to the public library, Ethan positioning himself between Miles and the street, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. It was strange, this feeling, this protectiveness. For so long, Ethan had focused only on his own survival, on making himself as small a target as possible. Now walking tall beside Miles, he felt something unfamiliar unfurling in his chest. At the library entrance, Miles turned to him with solemn eyes. "Are you a superhero?" he asked with complete seriousness. Ethan laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuineness. "Definitely not," he said, ruffling the boy's damp hair. Just a regular guy. That's what they all say in the beginning. Miles replied knowingly, adjusting his Spider-Man backpack. Secret identities and stuff. I'll see you around, Miles, Ethan said, smiling as the boy pushed through the heavy library doors. He never expected to see Miles again. Their paths had crossed by chance, and Ethan had done what anyone would do, or should do, at least. But 3 days later, as he trudged home from another exhausting day of staying invisible at school, a familiar voice called his name. Miles stood on his front porch, waving excitedly. The modest house was just 2 blocks from Ethan's apartment complex, on a street he rarely had reason to walk down. Ethan. Hey, Ethan. Miles bounded down the steps, nearly tripping in his enthusiasm. Mom, this is him. This is the one who helped me. A woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had the same dark eyes as Miles, though hers were tired around the edges, lined with the worries of single parenthood. You must be Ethan, she said, coming down to join them. Miles hasn't stopped talking about you since Tuesday. I'm Sophia Reyes. She extended her hand and Ethan shook it, feeling oddly formal. Would you like to come in for dinner? It's just spaghetti, but there's plenty. Ethan hesitated. His mother wouldn't be home until late. She rarely was these days, working double shifts at the hospital to keep them afloat. And the alternative was another night of microwave ramen in front of his sketchbook. That would be nice, he said finally. Thank you. The Reyes home was small but warm, filled with photos and mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. It smelled of garlic and tomato sauce, and something else Ethan couldn't name but recognized instantly. Home, the way homes were supposed to feel. Miles chattered through dinner, telling his mother about how Ethan had totally scared those guys away, and asking Ethan a dozen questions about high school, about his drawings, which Miles had spotted peeking from his backpack, about whether he thought Spider-Man could beat Thor in a fight. Sophia watched with a smile, occasionally redirecting Miles when his enthusiasm overwhelmed his manners. After dinner, while Miles showed Ethan his collection of action figures, Sophia pulled Ethan aside. I want to thank you properly, she said quietly. Miles has had a rough time since his father left. The bullying started a few months ago, and he's been so withdrawn. But since he met you, she glanced toward her son, who was animatedly demonstrating a battle scene. I haven't seen him this excited in a long time. Ethan shifted uncomfortably under her gratitude. I didn't do much, he said. Anyone would have, but they didn't, Sophia interrupted gently. You did, and I'm grateful. She hesitated, then added, Miles mentioned you like to draw. I work at Brightline Studios. It's a small animation company downtown. We're having an open house for high school students next weekend. You should come. Ethan blinked in surprise. Animation had always been a distant dream, something to fantasize about between periods of just trying to survive the day. I'm not really good enough for something like that, he said. Sophia's smile was kind but firm. Why don't you let the professionals decide that? She wrote the details on a notepad and pressed it into his hand. No pressure, but the offer stands. That night, walking home under clearing skies, Ethan felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Possibility, perhaps. Or hope. Either way, it was strange and fragile and worth protecting. The week that followed was both better and worse than usual. Blake Donovan seemed to have found a new target, which gave Ethan a temporary reprieve from the worst of the bullying. But watching someone else endure what he had for so long created a sickening knot in his stomach, especially when that someone was Zach Leibowitz, a freshman with a stutter and a passion for robotics. On Thursday, Ethan found Zach cornered in the empty science lab, Blake and 2 of his friends circling like sharks. Please, Zach stammered, clutching a half-assembled robot to his chest. I worked on this for weeks. Then you should have worked harder, Blake said, reaching for the robot. Because it looks like garbage to me. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, every instinct screaming at him to turn around, to walk away, to protect the fragile peace he'd been granted. But then he remembered Miles's face, the trust in his eyes when he'd slipped his small hand into Ethan's. Stop, Ethan said, stepping into the room. His voice came out stronger than he expected, filling the space with unexpected authority. Blake turned slowly, surprise giving way to malicious delight. Well, look who decided to grow a spine, he said, abandoning Zach to focus on Ethan. You wanting some attention, Parker? Been missing our special time together? Ethan's throat tightened with fear, but he kept his eyes on Zach. Get out of here, he told the freshman. Take your robot and go. Zach hesitated only a moment before darting for the door, murmuring a grateful thank you. as he passed. What followed was predictable and painful. Blake and his friends weren't pleased about losing their entertainment, and they made sure Ethan felt every ounce of their displeasure. By the time they finished, Ethan's lip was split, his ribs ached, and a new bruise was forming along his jaw. But as he sat on the cold floor of the science lab, tasting blood and feeling the familiar sting of tears threatening, he realized something strange. He didn't regret it. For the first time, the pain felt like a choice he'd made rather than something inflicted upon him. He pulled out his sketchbook, miraculously undamaged in his backpack, and began to draw. Not his usual fantastical heroes with impossible powers, but something different. A slim-shouldered boy standing between danger and those who couldn't protect themselves. No cape, no mask, just determined eyes and hands steady despite their fear. Saturday arrived with uncertain skies and Ethan's even more uncertain courage. He'd nearly talked himself out of going to the Brightline Studios open house a dozen times, but the memory of Sophia's kindness and Miles's unwavering belief that he was somehow special kept pushing him forward. The studio occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and gleaming hardwood floors. Artwork lined the walls, concept sketches, storyboards, and finished animation cells that made Ethan's breath catch with their beauty and skill. "You came!" Miles's voice cut through the crowd, and suddenly the boy was there, wrapping thin arms around Ethan's waist. "Mom said you might, but I wasn't sure. And I told her we should call you, but she said you needed to decide on your own, and I'm so glad you did because I want to show you everything." Sophia appeared behind her son, smiling apologetically. "Take a breath, Miles," she reminded him gently before turning to Ethan. "I'm glad you came. Did you bring any of your work?" Ethan clutched his sketchbook tighter against his side. "Just this," he said. "But it's not. It's nothing special." "Let me be the judge of that," a new voice said. A man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes stepped forward, extending his hand. "James Bright. I founded this little madhouse." Ethan shook his hand, trying not to visibly panic. "Ethan Parker. I'm just here to look around, really." "Nonsense," James said, glancing at Sophia. "Sophia mentioned you've got talent, and she's never wrong about these things. Let's see what you've got." Before Ethan could protest further, James had gently taken the sketchbook and was flipping through it, his expression unreadable. Ethan watched with growing mortification as page after page of his private world was exposed. His clumsy attempts at perspective, his fantasies of heroes and worlds beyond his own small, painful existence. James paused at the most recent drawing, the slim-shouldered boy standing his ground. "This one," he said quietly. "Tell me about this one." Ethan swallowed hard. "It's nothing really. Just someone standing up when it would be easier not to." James studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if Ethan had confirmed something important. "How would you like to join our mentorship program?" he asked. "It's for promising young artists. 1 afternoon a week, working alongside our team, learning the fundamentals." Ethan stared, certain he'd misheard. "But I'm not. I've never had any training. I just draw what's in my head." "That," James said, tapping the sketchbook, "is exactly why I'm asking. Technique can be taught. The ability to translate emotion onto paper, that's much rarer." He handed the sketchbook back. "Think about it. Talk to your parents. But know that there's a place for you here if you want it." The walk home felt dreamlike, the city transformed by the possibility that had just opened before him. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a future beyond survival. A future where the drawings in his head might matter to someone besides himself. His mother was actually home when he arrived, dozing on the couch in her scrubs, the television murmuring in the background. She startled awake as he closed the door. "Ethan?" she mumbled, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Where have you been?" He sat beside her, the excitement of the day bubbling up into words he couldn't contain. He told her about Miles and Sophia, about Brightline Studios and James Bright's offer. As he spoke, he watched his mother's exhaustion give way to something he hadn't seen in a long time. Pride, warm and uncomplicated. "Oh, honey," she said when he finished, reaching out to touch the bruise along his jaw that he'd almost forgotten. "This is wonderful. And this?" Her fingers gently traced the edge of the bruise. "Do you want to tell me about this?" Ethan hesitated, then told her about Zach, about the science lab, about his choice. He expected disappointment or worry, the familiar refrain to keep his head down, to not make trouble. Instead, she gathered him into her arms, holding him tight despite his wince of pain. "I've been so busy trying to keep us afloat," she whispered against his hair, "that I didn't see you were drowning in your own way. I'm so proud of you, Ethan. So proud." That night, Ethan updated his social media for the first time in months. Nothing dramatic, just a simple sketch of a small boy with oversized glasses and a Spider-Man backpack, captioned, "Sometimes heroes are the ones who remind us we can be brave." He had exactly 73 followers, most of them classmates who probably followed him out of social obligation. He expected nothing and received nothing immediately. But somewhere in the digital darkness, something was beginning to stir. The mentorship at Brightline changed everything. One afternoon a week became 2, then 3 as James recognized Ethan's hunger to learn. Sophia became a steady presence in his life, offering guidance and occasional drives home, and Miles appointed himself Ethan's unofficial assistant, solemnly passing markers and offering creative suggestions that ranged from brilliant to hilariously impractical. At school, something was shifting too. The incident with Zach had not gone unnoticed. The freshmen sought Ethan out at lunch, sitting quietly beside him with his robotics project spread across the table. Others joined them gradually. Maylin with her poetry, Darius with his battered guitar, Priya with her advanced calculus textbooks. They formed an island of misfits, each broken or bullied in their own way, finding unexpected strength in their gathering. Blake Donovan still ruled the hallways, but his kingdom was showing cracks. Twice more Ethan intervened when Blake targeted someone weaker, and each time the beating Ethan received seemed less severe, the crowd of onlookers less amused and more uncomfortable. Something was changing in the atmosphere of Westridge High, a slow recalibration of what was acceptable, what was admired. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to post his drawings online. Simple sketches at first, then more complex pieces as his skills improved under James's tutelage. He drew what he knew, a boy finding his voice, standing up despite his fear, creating safe spaces for others to exist as they were. He never showed faces, never named names, but the emotion in each piece was raw and recognizable. His follower count grew slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. 100, 500, 1,000. Comments appeared beneath his posts from strangers around the world. "This is exactly how it feels to be the only one standing. I showed this to my son who's being bullied. He said it made him feel less alone. You put into pictures what I could never put into words." 3 months into his mentorship, James called Ethan into his office. On his computer screen was Ethan's latest piece, a simple image of hands forming a circle, diverse in size and shade, creating a protected space within. "This post has been shared over 50,000 times. James said without preamble. "Did you know that?" Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's not possible," he said. "I only have a few thousand followers." "It was picked up by several major accounts," James explained. "It's resonating with people, Ethan. Your work is speaking to something universal." He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "I want to propose something to you. A project. Your story, not the details, but the essence. A short animated film about finding courage, about standing up, about creating community from brokenness." Ethan's mouth went dry. "I don't know how to make a film," he said. James smiled. "That's what the rest of us are for. Your vision, our technical expertise. A collaboration." He slid a contract across the desk. "We'd need your parents' permission, of course, but this would be a real project, Ethan, with a real budget and real distribution possibilities." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The possibilities swirled in his mind like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. He opened his laptop and began to sketch digitally, letting the images flow without censoring them. A boy curled protectively around his pain, another boy with glasses too big for his face, a circle widening to include the broken and the brave. When morning came, he had the bones of a story. Not his story exactly, but a truth that had grown from his experience. That courage was contagious. That standing up once made standing up again easier. That community could grow from the most unexpected beginnings. He called the concept Invisible Lines and presented it to James the next day. 6 weeks later, production began. The project consumed Ethan's spring and summer. He worked alongside professional animators, learning their craft while guiding the emotional core of the film. His mother took fewer shifts to support him, coming to the studio on her days off to watch with undisguised wonder as her son's vision took shape on screen. Miles appointed himself the film's most critical reviewer, insisting on adjustments when a scene didn't make him feel it right here, accompanied by a solemn tap on his chest. At school, the changes continued. Blake Donovan's reign of terror faded not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a slow erosion of power. More students found their voices, their courage. Ethan's lunch table grew until it spilled over into a second, then a third. Not an island of misfits anymore, but a continent of the different but not less. Invisible Lines premiered at a small film festival in September, nearly a year after Ethan had extended his hand to Miles at the bus stop. Ethan sat between his mother and Sophia, Miles bouncing excitedly on Sophia's other side, as the lights dimmed and his vision filled the screen. The 7-minute film told the story of a boy who begins to see the connections between people as visible lines of light, some vibrant and strong, others fraying or broken. He discovers he can repair these connections through small acts of courage and kindness, creating a web of light that eventually transforms his dark world into one of color and warmth. When the credits rolled, the theater was silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Ethan sat frozen, unable to process the response until his mother squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "That's my boy," she whispered fiercely. "That's my beautiful, brave boy." The film won the festival's Emerging Artist Award, which led to other festivals, other recognitions. Brightline Studios posted it online with Ethan's permission, and within weeks it had been viewed millions of times. Schools began using it in anti-bullying programs. Parents shared it with children struggling to find their place. Subtitles appeared in dozens of languages, expanding its reach across continents and cultures. And the messages poured in, thousands of them from every corner of the world. I showed this to my class of 3rd graders. Now they look for invisible lines to fix every day. My son died by suicide after years of bullying. I wish he could have seen this film. I wish he could have known he wasn't alone. I was the bully. This made me see what I was breaking. I've reached out to apologize to those I hurt. Ethan read each message, overwhelmed by the film's impact. This thing he had created, this expression of his pain and his healing, had somehow become a lifeline for others. It was humbling and terrifying and beautiful all at once. The most unexpected message came on a Tuesday afternoon as Ethan sat in the school library, working on concept art for what might become his second film. A shadow fell across his sketchbook, and he looked up to find Blake Donovan standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Can I sit?" Blake asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from Ethan. Ethan hesitated, then nodded, closing his sketchbook instinctively. Blake sat heavily, eyes fixed on the table between them. "I saw your film," he said after a long silence. "My little sister showed it to me. She's in 5th grade. She said," he swallowed hard, "she said it made her think of me." "Not in a good way." Ethan said nothing, waiting. "I recognized myself," Blake continued, his voice low, "the one breaking the lines. And I recognized you, even though it wasn't really you in the film. It was what you did." He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "My dad hits my mom. Has for years. I never knew how to stop it, so I took it out on everyone else. Made myself feel big by making others feel small." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and pushed it across the table. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that your film, it made me see myself, really see myself. And I'm trying to find a different way to be." The paper contained information about a support group for teenagers from homes with domestic violence. Blake was attending. Had been for 3 weeks. "I don't know if I can fix what's broken in me," Blake said, standing. "But I'm trying, because of what you showed me." He walked away then, leaving Ethan staring at the paper, understanding blooming slowly in his chest. That healing was not linear, that bullies had their own broken lines, that change could come from the most unexpected directions. 2 years later, Invisible Lines had been viewed over 20 million times. Ethan, now a freshman at the California Institute of the Arts on a full scholarship, had become an unlikely spokesperson for a growing movement centered on emotional courage and community building. His second short film, Echoes, exploring the ripple effects of both cruelty and kindness, had just been acquired by a major streaming platform. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, none of that mattered. What mattered was the bus stop where it had all begun, and the boy waiting there. Not so small anymore at 11, but still with glasses too big for his face and a backpack covered in superhero pins. "You're late," Miles complained as Ethan approached, though his mock frown quickly dissolved into a grin. "Mom says you're staying for dinner. No excuses this time." "Oh, I wouldn't miss it," Ethan promised, falling into step beside him. "How was school?" Miles launched into a detailed account of his day, his words tumbling over each other with familiar enthusiasm. Ethan listened, smiling at the boy who had, in a strange way, saved him as much as he had saved Miles. They walked past the convenience store, past the spot where three boys had once cornered a frightened child, past the place where Ethan had first discovered his voice. The world had changed since then. Or perhaps it was Ethan who had changed, learning to see the invisible lines that connected pain to healing, fear to courage, isolation to community. Do you ever think about that day? Miles asked suddenly, as if reading Ethan's thoughts. The day we met. Ethan nodded. All the time. Me too, Miles said, looking up at him with solemn eyes. That's the day my superhero found me. Ethan laughed, slinging an arm around the boy's shoulders. I'm not a superhero, Miles. I've told you 1,000 times. Miles shrugged, leaning into Ethan's side. That's still what all the best ones say. And as they walked on through the gathering dusk, Ethan thought perhaps Miles was right after all. Not about him being a superhero. He was still just Ethan Parker, still learning, still healing, still finding his way. But about how heroes are made. Not from cosmic accidents or genetic mutations, but from ordinary moments of courage, from hands extended across divides, from invisible lines repaired and strengthened, until they form a web strong enough to hold us all. A bullied teen had stood up for a kid, not knowing he'd become a superhero to millions. But perhaps that was the secret all along, that we never know the full impact of our courage, the true reach of our kindness. We simply choose, in each moment, to be the person we wish we'd encountered when we needed someone most. And sometimes in the choosing, we find ourselves transformed.